Well, good morning, Cerberus folks out there. How are you? It is a beautiful day in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. And why do I say that? Because Congress is not in session today, and I will be able to retain just a little bit more liberty for these next 24 hours. You've got me, you've got Gregory Junkbond Carpenter here, you have Super Suzanne Sherman, you have Mr. Booger, and you have our producer, producers, Mr. Jeffrey Johnson. And let me tell you, this guy knows how to produce. We didn't get to a couple things yesterday. We're going to get to those things today. What are those things? What are those things you do? Well, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to talk about measles. We're going to talk about uh, Abraham Lincoln. Don't throw things, please, folks. Thank you very much. And we're going to talk about everything that we promised we'd talk about, but we didn't talk about, like Social Security. So, Suzanne, give us the legals.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I take responsibility. I kind of followed a, a trail of mental bird crumbs that took us away from our chartered course yesterday. So my apologies. But
I had heavy metal bird crumbs.
How do you think I feel? I put out there, oh, we're talking about this, and then we never even get to it.
We did that and the other thing, but we did, yeah.
I feel like, I lied to our listeners.
You could be a politician.
The three of us were yapping so much. Jeff just turned off his mic, gave up, and cleaned his guns. So he got something done. He was productive, unlike the three of us. But want to welcome you, everybody, to the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny here. And you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Want to welcome the new members to our fan page, which is CRN. We love getting new people following. We really appreciate the great comments we're getting on the show and people asking me. It's great. Sometimes I feel like, oh, do I want to get up this morning? And I wake up and see messages. Hey, is there a show today? And I see that at night. Oh, are you doing a show tomorrow? So we really, really appreciate the enthusiasm and people wanting to listen in and contribute to the topics we have. So thank you very much. We have a YouTube page, live chat going on during the show. And if Jeff can turn, his attention from gun cleaning to the chat, he will acknowledge your comments and questions on there. So we appreciate you joining, and we appreciate you, Jeff Johnson. I like to make fun of you. We have a SoundCloud page. So if you cannot listen live, you can catch all of our recordings on there. Yesterday, we had a really good conversation about homeschooling and about how the government's going to be cracking down on this. We know that the hit piece on Fox News, where they said homeschooling is essentially a screen for people who want to abuse their children. This is the first steps in paving the way to greater regulation aimed at eventually banning homeschooling. As I said yesterday, homeschooling is one of our best defenses against the indoctrination of the cultural Marxists. We are seeing a society, a generation of absolutely brain dead kids coming out of the school system. We were talking before the show about kids not being able to think analytically, ask the pointed questions. I remember this from, back before electricity when I was in school. All we had to do was really repeat the facts. There was no analytical thought or questioning the narrative. Homeschool kids, we get to do that with them. They will question authority. They will question, are these laws just? This is the last thing government wants. So again, the narrative is always going to be controlled. I've got to share with you, Tom Mullen, a good friend of ours. He's an author for Freedom of Economic, Foundation of Economic Education. And I had made a comment that Twitter had shut me down for 12 hours. They wanted my phone number before I could get back on. I used the word tard, which is short for retarded. Twitter immediately responded saying I couldn't make fun of somebody's mental incapacities, thereby confirming the fact that this individual was. Point being is, this is what he said. People with Down syndrome were once referred to as idiots. That became unacceptable. So the term retarded was used in place. Retarded means slow. Tard is short for retarded. I mentioned, had I called the guy a freaking idiot, it would have been perfectly acceptable. We see that all the time. We're going back full circle to the original terminology, once deemed hateful, now being okay. These people are so confused. They don't know what is up or what is down. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, I forgot to remind people that they can find all of our shows on SoundCloud, our YouTube link on my social media bar over on SuzanneCSherman.com. My articles and blogs are there as well. So that being said, Jeff and Booger, want to welcome you guys to the show. How are you both today? Booger, we'll start with you.
I'm doing fine, Suzanne.
Let me continue real quick with this article. When we're talking about how we control the narrative, this I came across yesterday. Park City officials, this is local news. I always try to start with a little bit of local flair when I get started. Park City officials respond to accusations about a city hall housing project. I'm not going to go through the whole article, but the point being, they were complaining about whether or not the city council was granting itself any favoritism with regards to putting forth its own municipal housing projects. People, of course, in Park City want diversity of socioeconomic and ethnic mix in our community here, but now they're complaining, well, there are too many people here and housing is too dense as it is. The article wraps up with a criticism that those that are questioning the project are questioning the details rather than the overarching ideals of the municipal housing program. Right then and there, ladies and gentlemen, there you see it. Doesn't we have to pass the bill to see what's in it sound familiar? Doesn't I can be factually incorrect as long as I'm morally correct. We see this all the time, and this just came across yesterday. They want you to feel, not to think. And if you want to try to use facts and think and use logic, you're going to be criticized because clearly the ideals are more important than any factual implications we may have. Anybody want to comment on that before we move on? Nope.
It sounds like no one wants to comment on it. So
I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, I'd just be reiterating what you already talked about. So,
yeah, I mean, we just constantly have to control the narrative. These people lose on the facts all the time. This goes back last week. I posted an article about somebody on our Facebook group saying that it was good on my private page. I saw in my news feed. Canada saying that your religious beliefs have to take a back seat to the LGBTQ LMNP movement. And this person said, good. And I said, how in the world is that good? Why does one ideology take precedence over another where both could thrive if we had a social system of mutual respect? If you go to a business seeking them out, knowing they disagree with your message, and by needing a cake or some sort of service, you are going to be expected to implicitly endorse that message. And then if they respectfully decline, Baker in Colorado, Baker's in Oregon, they're going to be destroyed by the court system. This is not freedom. If we respect the other sides both, everybody can survive and be happy. And butterflies will fly. We'll have unicorns. Because I came across an article yesterday. As I said last week, this isn't about equality. This is about superiority. Now in the UK, there's an article that came out that a 13-year-old child is being harassed for not being gay or tranny. So this is what we're getting to. Anyway, I'm not going to do what I did yesterday and take us down a completely different path. We're going to get to yesterday's topic, which was Social Security. Junk Bond, welcome back. I think you ran off to get some coffee for a minute.
I did, and I was speaking forcefully and with very, very stern vigor in my voice, with my mute button on before when you asked for comments. And I believe that the dogs here in the room thought I was yelling at them, actually. So I'll add my comments now without the mute button on, if that's all right. I don't want to like overstep my bounds and, end up on the radio and, not supposed to be there right now. But this has become the norm, and it's become the norm because the narrative has been pushed that way by a small group. Again, it's always a small group that pushes for change. I had a discussion with little Miss Amber, my chef. We call her here at the house Bratatouille, and we were having a discussion and yesterday, and she asked me why something, and I don't want to get into the topic specifically, but why changing something was not necessarily good. And I said, okay, well, let's look at a couple of other cases that you've seen things that have changed before, haven't you? And she said, well, yeah. I said, okay, let's walk down the path from where it starts to where it ends. And I showed her how the natural progression of the quote progressive mindset doesn't relate to progress in the sense that it is an improvement over what was there before. It is progress towards a goal, which is a progressive mindset. It's not, it's implied that it's a better end state than where you had started at, but it doesn't specifically get you to a better end state. It just gets you somewhere else that usually isn't as good as where you started. And the same thing with this LGBT, MN, and O, whatever letters there. I'm sorry. I don't remember. It's a new religion, and I'm not that familiar with it. I am familiar with a lot of other religions, but not that one yet.
We will be. They put us in the re-education camps.
Yeah, and that one is very much so a religion. It is. You think about it. What are you worshiping? What are you focused on? What does your world revolve around? That's your religion, folks. That's that's where your belief system, your value system is all locked in. Religion doesn't have to mean that you have to go and pray to God. It means something that you are religiously following. And there's some other implications in there too. But I mean, that's one of those misconceptions that a lot of people have. Religion doesn't have to have specifically a deity God. Your God could be anything.
Well, Junk Bond, last week when I was discussing that article and the individual who proudly proclaimed that he made a woman of faith cry by calling her faith a fantasy, this is the same person that said shouldn't shun people for whom they love. Well, you just did. You made her cry. You bragged about it. And then again, I'm not going to get into the whole issue of the national anthem here, but when that played at an event, he took off his hat, he stood up, put his hat over his heart and then demanded that I do the same thing. And I look at him and said, well, I know what this person worships, and they are going to bring the government down upon this woman who is a God-fearing woman to compel her to behave in a manner. And we see, again, these people worship God, their God is government. And I refer to that in my article, Church of the National Government, published by the 10th Amendment Center. And, nobody's saying we hate America if we don't stand up for the pledge. But by all means, I don't think I have to be compelled to stand for a song that worships the military.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. I used to be. When I was in the military, I used to be. I smoked the crack, and then when I worked at the National Security Agency, and I was the person who made the Kool-Aid that everybody else drank. That was my job. I was the Kool-Aid master. Okay, I was a level 5 sommelier with Kool-Aid. Let's put it like that. And you folks, you're drinking my Kool-Aid today. I'm forced to live within the constraints of the Kool-Aid that I had made and poured for everyone that you consumed, as well as everybody else in the world. If you think that what you're seeing and what your reality is here is by your own hand, and you're allowed to do things by your own hand, brother, I got some news for you. You are smoking the crack. You have no idea how much everything is a complete setup and how much of a lie you're living. I hate to be that person to bear the bad news to you, but I made the Kool-Aid for you. You want to, you want to yell at somebody, you can yell at me because I know what is wrong. I know what happened and I know why it happened. And you didn't have anything to do with it. The Democrat Party doesn't have anything to do with it. The Republican Party doesn't have anything to do with it. It is all part of a chess game where parts are moving all the time. And you are just part of the game. You're lower than a pawn.
Who are the chess masters?
Yes. I I can go into the part about pouring and making the Kool-Aid, Suzanne, but I can't get into the rest of it, unfortunately. I will say that, the CIA director, and I'll say it again, the CIA director said Ronald Reagan first got into office, one of the first meetings he had, and Director Helms told him, he said, we'll know our plans have worked when everything the American people believe is a deception. You better believe he was serious because he was. That's out in the open press. And if you want to see the emails, I told people before, I will gladly share the emails between Greg and I and said named person who was in that meeting who quoted Herr Director. Folks, if I'm telling you, I got the proof. So if you want to see the emails, I'll put them out there. If not, I'll hang on to them for now.
No, put them out there. We want to see it.
Yes. Okay, yes, ma'am. I'll forward them over to you. And then you put it up on your website.
It kind of goes to why Julian Assange and his whole arrest has been swept under the rug now. I mean, what he exposed was very real. I don't care how he got the information, and anybody that does care really doesn't care. Again, they're worshiping their government as their God, and they put that above the truth. Jesus said the truth shall set you free. But these people are not interested, that contingency. So we've had some distractions since then. Am I saying they're connected or they're done on purpose? No. Conveniently, Notre Dame, we had Sri Lanka, we've had all these distractions. Now we're back to just talking about politics. Nobody's talking about Julian Assange. But before we get to him, let's get to Social Security. I promised everybody we were going to get to that yesterday. FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, has an article telling us that Social Security is facing a $42.1 trillion shortfall. Now, as we know, this was signed into law by FDR because apparently the American people couldn't be trusted to put away money for their own retirement plan. So it was going to be up to the government to do it. I believe this was going to be voluntary at the time.
And it was a temporary measure.
And temporary. Anytime the government signs into law that they are going to take your money, be warned, it will never be voluntary, and nor will they ever retract it. It will never go back. Now, when people talk about trying to fix it, well, I paid into it. And that's a myth. You've paid into nothing. There's no account. I think it was in 1968, LBJ signed over that this was going to the general fund. Let me ask you this. Anybody that passes away at, let's say the age of 60 before they start collecting this, does their estate get refunded what they have paid into Social Security?
Pick me. I know. No. Did I get it right? Did I get it right?
I believe.
I'm so excited. I love playing this game.
42 point. Yes, you get a cookie. $42.1 trillion shortfall. Anybody thinks at this stage that they're going to get anything back? I think it was by 2035, they said it was going to be gone. I guess we're just going to print some more money. That should fix everything. So this article starts out saying that every year the Social Security Administration issues a trustee report. Why have a trustee's report when nothing is going to change? Nobody wants to touch this and talk about it and say, you know what, let's stop digging this hole we're in, stop taking people's revenue, but they will never stop doing it. It's not even up on the campaign debates, is it, gentlemen?
No, I don't think so. I mean, do you trust the trustees?
No.
Why would you, right?
Do you
So
even
there-
know who the trustees are? Does the average person even know who the trustees are? I can guarantee that they don't, because I don't even know who the trustees are.
Well, what they're saying here is the bad news is there's a never-ending increase in this program's fiscal burden. They have a graph here, and I put this on my page, Suzanne Sherman's The Wasatch Report. You can find that on Facebook. We'll put it on CRN as well. They said here that the only good news is that the country presumably will be much richer in the future, so we'll have more income to pay all those taxes and finance all that spending. I don't know how they're coming to that conclusion. How are we going to be richer? By bringing in more people who are going to get more welfare and who are going to get more low-paying jobs, and that can go into Social Security? This doesn't make sense to me. I'm not an economist. I've never said I was. All I know is that the whole program stinks to high heaven. It's blatantly unconstitutional. And I also know that if you had used that money and invested it in your own retirement account, you would be far better off. But again, all of these government programs that come in under the pretense of our own benefits one entity and one entity only. Who wants to raise their hand and guess which entity that is? Jeff, do you want one now? Booger?
No, I don't want a cookie because I don't need
Yeah.
a virus in my computer.
You know,
Don't worry, it's not a persistent cookie.
Okay.
well,
That's
see,
a good start.
one of the things I see on the whole Social Security thing, I know multiple people around this small town here whose only retirement plan was to smoke themselves via cigarettes onto Social Security. Now, these people are in such horrible health now, they can no longer work, but they never really worked. Okay. And they never really did anything but party. But now they're going to vote the way they need to vote to keep that government umbilical cord supplying them. Yeah.
Wow.
Basically, they would still be working had they not smoked themselves into a cush position with a little bit of O2 heading toward them. Yeah. That's what's happened around here with some people.
That's amazing. When you provide free things, the society tends to lower the standards. We saw that with the Pilgrims. Anybody who missed out on that, the Pilgrims tried socialism. It didn't work. Everybody became lazy. Then they fell short of food. That's why they ended up being dependent on the Indians to save their butt, because they all decided they were going to be lazy at the same time and didn't want to work that hard because people were getting free stuff from their neighbor. Now, when you have a situation like this with medical care involved, and I'm not going to call it health care, I'm calling it medical care. And there's a reason why you call it medical care, because it's freaking medical care. It's not health care.
Medical attention. I wouldn't even use the word care.
Okay. Okay, fine. Put the profession down like that. You just go right ahead because they deserve it. Now, medical attention, okay, plays back into the hands of another public policy tragedy, which is where you try to take over the medical sector. See, the difference between public health and medical health is public health is a population-based treatment, like immunizations are focused on, quote, public health, not the individual's health. It's focused on the whole of the population. Medical attention is, the herd mentality. Medical attention is what an individual receives when they have something that has brought their body, let's say, out of specs, maybe. I guess that's a good analysis of it. I don't know.
I would say
I lost my thought.
Oh, no, you're right. I mean, people do stuff that totally destroys their health. And
Right.
now, they're used as the poster child for, oh, look, we have to have it, and
That's right.
yes.
It's that progressive concept again, because you can make the case by highlighting the exception in the case. And that's supposed to play back into the whole of the population. If a small percentage of people have smoked themselves into a situation where they end up with lung cancer, emphysema, or some type of respiratory illness, you can't apply that back to the rest of the population. That doesn't apply. It only applies to that small research diagnostic group that you're focused on. But we see this conflictation of one group with another all the time. You like that word, Jeff? You see that all the time. And this is how we end up with these gargantuan policies that are overarching and cover everything in the world that they're not supposed to cover. Guarantee you, you're going to these death panels we talked about. Death panels are real. They're going to be expanding. And I will cite a case in Holland where they just removed all the requirements to allow people to euthanize themselves. You used to have a medical reason. You needed to be in pain, unbearable pain, or have a terminal illness. Now you can just say, "Hey, you know what? I'd like to just kill myself, if you guys don't mind." And number two, it applies to everybody with any type of mental illness whatsoever. So their caregiver can at any time now say, "Oh, you know what? Forget it. We don't want this guy anymore." You're going to see that mindset start to transition around the world. It's already happening in a couple other places in Europe and a couple places in Asia. So watch out for it here too.
Well, I've
Well,
mentioned
we're
that.
gonna have, we have Social Security going a year ago. So June 5th, 2018, the LA Times headline: Medicare will become insolvent in 2026. So, I mean, you have Social Security, which is part of a tax that people are paying in, and they're paying in under the assumption that there's going to be money there for them retirement.
They're paying into the general fund. They're not paying into
the government's fault, and they're paying in for Medicare with the intention of having medical insurance in their retirement, and it's being spent on everything else. And they're both going to be insolvent. And what's going to happen when the checks stop coming, when the welfare checks stop going? What is going to happen in our society? It's not going to be good.
Oh, by the way, gender reassignment surgery is now going to be covered, I believe, on Medicaid. So we have that. This article does say that the obvious takeaway here is that the program is bankrupt. And as I mentioned, with a private fund, if you had invested on your own, you would do exponentially better. And this is what they say also: a private pension fund with the numbers that we see for Social Security would have been shut down a long time ago, and the executives would be put in prison for running a Ponzi scheme, which is exactly what Social Security is. But interestingly enough, politicians don't like to put themselves in prison. They will eventually be forced to address this huge shortfall. If nothing else, the so-called trust fund, which hasn't a real trust since it is filled with IOUs, runs out of money in 2035. So the interesting question here is what sort of solution they choose when the crisis occurs. So, well, not surprisingly, many politicians want higher taxes because, as we know, those seem to fit everything. They do come up with some solutions here: personal retirement accounts, and they cite the Australian system, Chilean, Hong Kong, Swiss, Dutch, and Swedish system. So, again, I think we need to start phasing this out. I don't like the myth that you paid into it, you were defrauded, cut our losses, start being reliant. I've been sitting here thinking, what are the answers to this absolute train wreck of a government? We can't escape from under it. There's nowhere you can go, even out here in the middle of nowhere. I've got these idiots sending draft registration cards to my son's American Community Survey, wanting to know how many toilets I have. I've got some clown who the food chain traces up to the EPA, wanting to inspect the creek running through my backyard. How do you get away from this? They've taken over student loans. They've taken over health insurance. They've taken over pretty much everything. What do? Downsize. This last fiscal year, I paid 0 federal income taxes. Why? Because I scaled way back. I changed my life completely because I no longer want to feed this beast. Yeah.
I see a fabulous government solution on this. I mean, look at everything we've talked about so far. Two great goals, okay? The death panels, because let's look at it. If Social Security supporting these people that have smoked themselves into a state of not being able to take care of themselves or through whatever means, obesity, now the death panels can come out because look, the government's absolutely broke trying to take care of people, so we have too many people, but we also have to raise taxes on the people that we're not going to get rid of. And the whole mental health issue, how I see it getting manipulated, is they can sit there and say, look, this person's not capable of making his own decisions, but were he would not want to continue to live in his current state. So I actually see two fabulous opportunities for the government.
Well, and this is exactly Rahm Emanuel's brother, who's a medical doctor, had written about this, and he had said he referred first of all he refers to human beings as units, and they talk about this I guess a scalability of how people are going to be treated, and society hadn't in with regards to infants and very young children, society really hadn't invested much into them, so we're not going to put that much into treating them if they're going to have vastly huge medical expenses. And the elderly, of course, well, they're not going to be contributing dollars anymore because they have passed their income contributing time frame. So let's focus on the worker drones, keep the herd healthy and productive, because really now what we are tax chattel for the general government. What's
That's
the
a productivity curve, is what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
exactly. And that's why we're focusing this on the kids. We know that in Prussia, the public school system was designed to make productive and compliant future factory workers. Look who's behind Common Core, the big tech giants. They want to have now a nice population of compliant drones. They're going to sit in cubicles for them. So
It,
meanwhile, go ahead.
no, it sounds like you've read the book Weapons of Mass Instruction. Have you read?
Instruction. That's
Yes,
a great book.
it is a fabulous book, and it covers all of the stuff you're covering.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
Heard of that.
weapons of mass instruction. You should read that, Suzanne. That's a great one.
And here's the thing, if they control the death panels and they pass red flag laws and people that they don't like their, let's say, their take on LGBTQ, whatever, and then, or they don't like their take on guns, they'll be mentally ill. And so the death panels will make it easy for them to get rid of those.
Right. Look at it, the expanding definitions of psychiatric illnesses.
Correct.
Look
It's
at
just
how
like
much
when I
it's
tell people,
expanded
you
in
go
the
to
new
the doctor-
DSM that's out. The new DSM has many, many more categories for people with psychiatric deficiencies, I think they call it nowadays. But you're not going to, you're not going to be able to get away from it. You're not going to be able to uh, manipulate your way through this system. I'm telling you, you're stuck here. And if you can't get to the hills where Suzanne is, then you're really looking down the wrong end of the barrel.
Now,
Well, so
Ty,
here's the thing. I keep telling people every time you go to the doctor, and every time I go to the doctor, I get asked this: "How are you sleeping?" And that's not a benign question. It is a mental health question. If you
It's
say
loaded,
you're sleeping well, you are now in a mental health category, and you're going to be that goes into the computerized medical healthcare system, quote unquote, and the government has it. And now, again, here we go. The death panels. Oh, this guy's a mental health problem. We need to get rid of him.
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to ensure that they don't qualify to carry firearms.
well, you just
Oh
you
yeah, you're
got
on
right.
that.
And then from there, you are removed from the system. Put it
This
like
is
that.
right where we were headed in my notes. Again, Jeff mentioned sleeping. How are you sleeping? That is actually a question on the American Community Survey sent to you by the Census Bureau, where they threaten you under penalty of federal law. You can see both of my middle fingers waving in the air right now. Under federal law of you answering completely and truthfully one of the questions on there, because they don't come right out and ask you if you have firearms. They're not that stupid, but they do ask you these questions. Are you sleeping? Can you dress yourself? Do you need assistance? There are certain red flag questions in there that will trigger a note on your responses. Speaking of red flags, extreme risk protection orders. We know this is going to all be tied together. Mr. First, we will get the guns, then we worry about due process, who interestingly was cheered at the NRA convention. Tie this in with, I got a brand new ID sent in the mail with a little yellow star. Should have been a Star of David on there. But now, what about Mr. I believe that vaccines shouldn't be, candidate Trump, mandatory? First, now they have to get the shots. What if now flu shots, all of these shots for the herd mentality, become mandatory? And by the way, we've got you now with real ID. You don't get your shots. Guess what? You don't get to buy a gun. You don't get your shots. You don't get to get your ID reissued. You don't get your shots. Forget your passport. They're already linking passport denials to being delinquent in taxes. And
Well,
Forget
they'll do it with shots too, because you have, the world is divided up into regions for mandatory vaccinations. So if you go someplace overseas, you have to have X number of mandatory vaccinations. With people becoming non-vaxxers, they're limited now in where they can travel to. So they're restricted here, and which is why you're going to see a back off, because there's going to be a religious thing that comes up again and say, hey, for religious purposes we don't do this. And just like the Mennonites don't necessarily vaccinate and the Amish don't necessarily vaccinate, I'm just using them as groups, and the stupidity of the whole vaccination concept in the first place again just comes to mind. People in northern Alaska don't need the same set of vaccinations that people in Hawaii do. People in Maine don't need the same thing that people in Arizona do. Even people in different parts of Arizona don't need the same thing. And why aren't people in the West, if it's so bad? Bubonic plague is one of those Schedule 1 type of biological agents. Well, it runs rampant, right? The groundhogs out in the Western U.S. have it. Why isn't everyone in the Western U.S. vaccinated for bubonic plague? It's part of a game. You're getting herded. You're getting manipulated into a specific place where you may not want to be, and it's just not going to be good. The answer is a bad answer.
well, I think Junk Bond, you also did a show. I think we have it up on Liberty Minutes about the polio vaccination and
Oh
the
yeah, the
live.
fraud of the polio vaccination. Yeah,
Can you give
all
a
those
2-minute
people didn't get the Salk vaccination. Everybody thought they got the Salk vaccination. They didn't get that. Not until the 80s, I think, they brought that style of vaccination back in. It wasn't his at all.
Can you do a
And
2-minute
FDR didn't even have polio. That was just part of a manipulation to build the industry, the vaccination industry, because that was a big thing at the time. They were starting to research, doing more microbiological research and learning more about these diseases. And that just became the next thing. The government set up a, quote, not-for-profit. It was, it was the, not Carnegie. It was the other one in New York, J.P. Morgan, who set up the it wasn't Carnegie. Set up the not-for-profit with the Rockefellers, I think. And that turned into March of Dimes. But it was a government organization at first that was promoting this whole concept of healthy living and polio vaccinations that people would have to do. So they were ready for it when it came. And when it came, a lot of people became ill and died because it wasn't ready and it was the wrong type of thing. And of course, now you know where we're at now with everybody not having to take polio anymore, but now they do have to because they thought they eradicated it, but they didn't really eradicate it because you can't eradicate something that is going to keep morphing. It's going to have genetic manipulations and you're not going to stop it.
And
It's ridiculous. You just force it into a stronger strain.
the government really wants a record also of everybody's vaccinations, regardless if, when I moved here to Utah, my children did or did not get their vaccines when we lived in California. And the first thing they asked out here when I would take them to a new physician, have they had all their immunizations? And I would say, yes, they had the ones that I wanted them to get. And I actually did give them, but I did my own schedule. And I never did the live polio vaccine, but they wanted records of everything. And I said, their pediatrician retired. And well, can you get the records? No, I can't. I can't even replicate them for you. And then, yeah.
Sorry, a little bit a nugget of knowledge to maybe help people on this. Do you know that you can get, there are places online where you can get any rubber stamp duplicated? Okay. We'll just say that skilled people, I'm not saying I would do such a thing, may be able to send a photograph to someone overseas and they will actually make a rubber stamp, the exact size and everything, and send it to you. Just saying that option.
Cerberus Radio Network does not endorse breaking any laws, knowingly breaking any laws. I'm just
blah, blah, blah.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying, some people might
I've seen
be
that
aware.
happen.
Yeah,
I've seen that happen.
It could be done if someone had bad intentions.
So that's something we should look out for.
I'm actually warning people, that work at these places to verify that people do have their vaccinations and everything.
There you go.
These rubber stamps can be made and falsified.
There you go. It's funny though, but you're right. You can actually get pretty much anything falsified nowadays. It's amazing how easy it is, especially with in the world of 3D printing and all these other technological quote advancements. It actually has it's exponentially increased the fraud industry's operating budget by quite a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people just look at the option when they're told, hey, you have to do this. They look at, how do I get out of doing it? And I'm one of these guys that look at, how can I say I did it and didn't do it?
Chunk Fund, earlier you mentioned about the philosophical or religious exemption that they're granting to some families for the vaccinations. And in California, they actually had not only a medical, but a philosophical and general waiver. It didn't have to just be religious. That waiver was taken away from the people of California by the legislature. And the primary mover behind that was actually a pediatrician who we know will have links to the pharmaceutical industry. Now, getting back to who are some of the movers and shakers behind what you talked about, the polio vaccine. Let's look at those that were behind taking access away from the American people of a natural plant that solves so many medical problems. We talked about that in another show. Why did cannabis become illegal? And we looked to Hearst because he had purchased a large swath of forest to make his newspaper. So clearly we had to eradicate hemp. And then there were those in the automobile industry also as well. Am I correct there?
Yeah, you're right. As a matter of fact, Hearst actually, he owned the forest. He owned the company that harvested the wood or lumbered the wood. And he owned the mills that processed it all. So he was making money all the way through that. And if you stop that
were the end product user.
Yeah,
that's right. His paper was the end product. That's right. Yeah, he wasn't necessarily out to sell papers. He was out to sell papers to fuel the rest of all of his industrial endeavors. It's quite an amazing story. But you want to learn how to make money? Look at what Hearst did.
And he used government to enrich himself. Now, I wonder where we've heard that before.
Pretty much from
And
the
I wonder who warned us against that. And I know his name because his name was Patrick Henry.
This Henry guy you talk of, he was mentioned in my daughter's history class not that long ago.
Yep. Here,
And we found out that he, now this is in Virginia. So hold on to your socks. We found that he was a troublemaker. This is what my daughter was told in her history class. George Mason was a troublemaker who tried to block the glorious Constitution from being ratified in Virginia. What I sat there. She said, "Yeah, he was." We were talking about it, and I said, "Oh, you're learning about the ratification of the Constitution." And she said, yeah, we've been going through that. She goes, I heard about different people, how they spoke up at the convention. And then they all went back to their states and they started to discuss it there. I said, well, did you learn about Virginia? She said, well, yeah, I sure did. She said, James Madison and Patrick Henry and George Mason. And she said the teacher said that Patrick Henry and George Mason, they were just instigators. They were problem makers for James Madison to try to stop everything that he had put together with, and she said, with Thomas Jefferson for us to have freedom.
Well, here's what
I nearly drove off the road, Jeff.
Yeah, because he warned us about this government that we would get that would have people using it to enrich themselves. He said, "You're not to inquire how your trade may be increased." So he's warning that people are going to use this new constitution, because this is his speech from June 5, 1788, his opposition to the Constitution. So he rightly understood that people are going to use this document to enrich themselves. You're not to inquire how your trade may be increased, nor how you're to become a great and powerful people, but how your liberties can be secured. Because he knew that this was going to take away your liberties. He was talking about that earlier in this paragraph. For liberty ought to be the direct end of your government. So here we are. Patrick Henry's right again, proves that this Constitution was from the beginning flawed, and that he knew that they were going to use it to make themselves rich by using this new Constitution. And we have Hearst to prove it. And we have ample Boeing and Raytheon and all these corporations that are using government to get massively rich.
Corporations are acting all corporation-y. What's next on our agenda there, Suzanne?
None of them are bad. They're not bad because they're a corporation.
I remember once upon a time, somebody, when I first started hearing some of this information, the corporations and these rich people are really running America. And I thought that was pure leftist propaganda, because I said, how does that possibly factor into this? Because I vote. We get to vote. These people aren't in charge. We get to vote. Yes.
You get the illusion that you're voting.
We get the illusion that we matter, and we really don't. And here's another article out of the New York Times. We're not going to go down this hole right now, but I do want to share this. And this is something that when I share this, a lot of my friends in the military get very upset with me. But the U.S. and Afghan forces have killed more civilians than the Taliban did, the reports find. Do you think that's going to make some folks bristle? Do you think I'm going to get a little red line going down below the horizontal line on my Facebook likes on my radio page?
You have no idea how important it is for us to travel around the world and kill people, Suzanne Sherman. I don't know what you're thinking.
And look, and not even that. I mean, look at Yemen. Yemen is a disaster, and we are the cause of that disaster. It's on massive scale. Women and children are just dying by the hundreds of thousands there, and we are supplying the weapons to murder all those people. I mean, it's shameful.
And Congress just voted to extricate ourselves from Yemen. And what did Trump do? The one who campaigned on getting us out of these wars, he vetoed it. Am I correct? He vetoed it.
You are correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what we
Yeah.
do.
Now we have to get a declaration of non-war. Okay. In that used to they used to have to go to Congress, get a declaration of war. Now Congress is having to declare there's not a war, and it's getting vetoed. That's just absolutely remarkable.
We are part and parcel of a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, yet we have those on both sides of the aisle in the circus of Washington, D.C., demanding we put a stop to gun violence. You know what? You want to put a stop to gun violence? Take the guns away from Washington, D.C. That'll put a stop to it.
That's a very good point, Suzanne.
Hammers, fists, and feet kill more people than firearms.
Really, I did not know that.
Every one of them.
Wow.
Say that list again, Jeff, please.
Hammers, fists, and feet kill more people than firearms.
Very good.
Well, and we have this ridiculous bump stock ban.
Go to the FBI. Go to their. You can find it. Look under the FBI for those statistics. I'm not going to give it to you. Go find it yourself. I did.
I pulled up the World Gun Violence Report as reported in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. It covers from 1980 all the way up to 2016. And it gives you all the statistics from every country in relation to each other, how much they increased or decreased, et cetera, per capita, how many people. The only thing it doesn't give you is per capita per gun. You follow? So it doesn't tell you, like, if Booger has 30 guns, right? It doesn't tell you that type of abstraction. It just gives a total number of deaths versus the number of people. Doesn't tell you that we have so many more guns here that you have to be much higher level of responsibility or anything like that. But it does give you an idea. So look that up in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's on the it's on the open internet. Suzanne, I just sent you the email about CIA Director William Casey, so you can, if you put that up on your website there.
Okay.
So people can see that it is a real group of emails that I was part of.
I will share those and retreat.
Yeah, Junk Band, you're serious? Yes, I am.
And retreat out to the woods if I need to hide. The cool thing is there was a TV show out here where they built a lot of shelters way out in the middle of nowhere. If I ever have to go into hiding, I can pick one of those and just disappear for a while. But
man, let's talk about John Wilkes Booth.
Yes, speaking of gun violence, let's talk about my favorite actor. Okay, a few years ago, and I had never heard this before, that there was the possibility that he had survived his execution, which we know took place in a barn. He put his hands up before his face and said, "Useless, useless," and the Union Army killed the assassination of the greatest emancipator of all time, channeling my inner so-so one Mark Levin. I saw this show called Ghost Lab, and they traveled around to different places, and they had all the scientific equipment where they could detect paranormal activity. Believe it or not, it's up to you. I thought the show was kind of cool to watch, but I'd never heard of this myth that John Wilkes Booth had survived. So they went to this place in Texas, and they had this electromagnetic sound detector where a voice said, "I am John Wilkes Booth." And so I forgot about it. I thought it was kind of a cool show. But the Daily Mail has an article now saying that John Wilkes Booth got away with assassinating Abraham Lincoln by evading capture and living nearly 4 decades under assumed identities. And this actually says it was in Texas. So it ties the two together. Junk Bond, what do you know about all this as I put your feet to the fire?
Well, I can say one thing about that. I watched Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 just 2 days ago. And if you've ever watched it, you'll understand what our show is all about on the Cerberus Radio Network and why we're here. At the end of it, Montauk, one of the firemen, is to be arrested for murder. And they have this manhunt that is socialized. It is shown on television, all this other stuff. And they finally corner Montauk. Where do they corner him? In front of his fire station. And of course, from a helicopter, they light him up and they take him out. Only problem is that it wasn't Montauk. It was just some innocent standby dude who happened to be cast in the role of Montauk. And one of the people said, the state has to close their case. They have to show that they are in control. Okay, that's all I was thinking. That's all I can say.
Point made. But here's what they're saying. They're using now facial recognition technology appears to show that Booth lived for decades under an assumed identity after he shot Lincoln at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The conventional historiography, that's a big word, holds that Booth was shot dead by Union soldiers 5 days after the assassination inside a barn farm in Virginia. But an investigator with Discovery Channel series Mummies Unwrapped is saying that modern day facial recognition technology shows his face matched with that of two other men, John St. Helen and David E. George. And that also coincides with what I had heard on that other television show. Again, I found that very interesting. And this is something else that I hadn't heard before. Apparently, he was purported to have died in 1865. The image of St. Helen was from 1877. The picture used of George was from 1902. St. Helen is considered a near perfect match. The facial recognition software analyzes features like spaces between the eyes, jaw lines, and images of noses and cheekbones. Just before St. Helen was purported to have died in 1877, he told somebody by the name of Bates, who was actually, he said, "I am dying. My name is John Wilkes Booth, and I am the assassin of President Lincoln." So kind of an interesting story here. And again, they said that there was actually a password provided by Andrew Johnson that if he gave that password, he would be let go by the Union Army. So a little bit of history there. I thought that was kind of interesting. Things aren't always as we seem, but I'll post this article and make of it what you want. The body, let's see, was embalmed. Oh, that was George's body, paraded around Okay, anyway. So thoughts on that one, gentlemen? Courts have so far quickly denied requests to exhume the body in Booth's graves and conduct DNA tests to determine if it really is him. Of course they have.
Yes, I seen that same documentary, and that was the big thing on it. Was they had tracked it to original source documents and things like that. It gave a lot of evidence, and you can't say proof, but it was evidence that theory is supported. And once again, why would the family not allow the body to be exhumed? They were going to do genetic comparison with a brother that's buried and some other family members and see if it was a genetic match.
I think there was also a similar talk about Jesse James as well. So anyway, well, we're going to wrap up the show today. I hope those that were a tad disappointed that we didn't get to Social Security yesterday have forgiven me for my indiscretion and taking us down the wrong path. I have the attention span of a gnat, I admit it, but we got to it today, and I hope you appreciated and enjoyed our analysis. I always enjoy our discourse. Somebody's sighing in the background. That's very rude. I think.
And I only got one firearm clean during the show today, so.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of fun, folks. We appreciate the support. We hope you enjoy the show as much as we enjoy doing it. And we will announce when we have the next one coming up. Hopefully we'll have one tomorrow. But on behalf of the rest of us here at the Cerberus Radio Network, Jeff Johnson, Booger, and Junk Bond, I'm Suzanne Sherman. I want to thank you for tuning in today. God bless you. Have a great day.